Hola amigos de Interamérica. Hi. Hi friends from Interamerica. Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion live session for the 5PtoGrow campaign. I hope you're ready to go. And well, my name is Susana Salguero. I'm executive for operations. So today we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion policy. As well, we're going to be talking about, especially the motto of this 5P2 Growth campaign. It's not only to talk about the policy, but from the policy, what else? If you accepted it, if you approved it in your NSO, what else you can do in the motto and the bottom line of anything. If you have any comments, writing or questions, you can write them down in the chat that is below your phone. If you're using your phone, please pull up your chat so we can chat a little bit more about this topic. And if you wait for me, I'm going to put the presentation and we're going to start. Please write down your names and let us know where you came from or where you're coming from. So let's start. Well, as I told you, this is the first session of 2018 of the 5P2Grow campaign. And this campaign meant to be talking about, and it's informative talking way of understanding the policies and make them better. So let's start. Today we're going to be talking about the diversity and inclusion policy for the Inter-America region. So the motto of this year is, as I told you so, it's from the policy to the implementation model. But let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the policy. So the purpose of this policy is to present the concepts and support diversity and inclusion in the Inter-America Scout region. To serve, we have two things. To serve as a framework and to serve and support the area of diversity and inclusion. But you probably want to know a little bit more about where this diversity and inclusion area started from. So it was approved in the 40th International Scout Conference a few years ago, like 5 years ago, in Slovenia, as part of the new strategy of Vision 2023, because we realized that it was a really important part of our initiative and it was an opportunity of growth. So if you listen to our conversations, you might want to know that we have the Vision 2023, and one is the most important thing that vision is asking us is for having to grow. So that answers your questions if you want to know about why we have the policy. But there's another thing why we create policy is to serve as a reference or a framework for this area so that all NSOs will understand the different limits and dimensions and can actually replicate this concept along your own localities and what it means to you. So the policy is divided by important stuff, right? So it gives you the elements. And it has the elements, then the principles, and some transversal definitions. If you saw the same session in 2018, in 2017, you might want to know that we focus especially on what we call the principles, because we want to explain the basis of the policy. But since the motto of this year is going to be from the policy on, we are going to go further understanding how the policy works and how are you going to take the advantages of having this policy within your NSO. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the principles. The principles are 5 principles, and it's the first one. It says diversity and inclusion as a result of an educational process. This gives you the idea and understands us like the scouting is an educational movement. Scouting sees diversity and inclusion as a valuable element that cuts across all areas of its educational proposal. It means that it goes across every section, every scouting activity, and it's for educational purposes as well. Therefore, it must be part of the training curricular in order to develop individuals who live according to these elements and strengthen the social fabric. So the second principle is that diversity and inclusion is based on rights, because it's as the human convention emphasized that freedom, justice, and peace around the world are based on the recognition of the inherent dignity and worth, the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the humanity, highlighting the need to ensure that people with disabilities and vulnerable or minority groups exercise this right fully and without discrimination. That means that in Scouting, we're fully embracing these vulnerable minorities and everyone that has disabilities, and is included into the youth program. Another principle is the diversity and inclusion based on institutional policies. That means that we have a policy that is a framework, this policy that we're going to be talking about. And it's based upon the demands of the society. It is establishing the rules, the laws, and regulation. They involve everything in the organization, and as is the result of the process of a political participation of various actors within the organization. That means that that's not only for educational program, but also for institutional development, but also to adults in scouting, and also to every member of your NSO that wants to talk about this area. Then we see diversity and inclusion as the equalization of opportunities. That means that the process to which all services offered by the society are made available to all. And when I say all, we mean all. In Scouting, this can be interpreted as the process that the NSO needs to follow in order to make the educational proposal accessible with equal opportunities to all children, young and adults. Then we have asserted language as an advocacy for diversity and inclusion. To have the assertive language, that means that includes terms and concepts and purposefully constructs attitudes that promote positive assessment and diversity and inclusion. And this principle, we talk about it specifically because we have the transversal definitions. That means that we have to have common ground in order for everyone to understand what we're doing and what we're talking about. Then the last principle, last but not least, is that inclusion practices as means of achieving inclusion. That means that we not should only talk about inclusion, but rather managing it and living it as part of the process of the scouting. Then we're going to go further. I'm going to explain some transversal definitions. So in order for us to go further with this policy, we need to understand that we need to have a common ground. We need to understand the concept of diversity. You are going to find them in page 8 and page 9 of the policy. I'm not going to explain them right now because we don't have time. But you can read all the concepts, and you really need to understand the concepts and be clear about what is diversity in scouting, what is inclusion in scouting, what we are talking when we say vulnerability, what are we talking when we say minority groups, what are we talking about whenever we say inclusion, what are we talking about when we talk about stigma, what are we talking about when we talk discrimination, and what are we talking about when we talk about welfareism. And these are very important concepts that we need to manage and we need to understand as adults in scouting and as well as members. Then we're going to go further, the elements. So we had 3 important elements about the diversity and inclusion policy. Is that first of all is the institutional approach. That means that it goes and passes through every of the areas that compose an NSO. So here in the Inter-America region, we understand that the NSO is composed by 3 main areas. The first one we call the youth program. And it's all what we call and what we dedicate about educational program and what we talk about the educational proposal for the young people. That means not only the members, I mean the young adults, the child, everyone that is receiving all this educational proposal, but rather the adults are giving it as well. Then we have also another area called adults in scouting. And when we say adults in scouting, it means that from 18 years old up, or it will depend on your NSO or in the country where are the laws. But normally, here in Latin America and here in the Latin America region, we address an adult as the person that is older than 18-year-old, right? So we talk about the young members, the young adults that are still receiving this educational proposal. We're talking about the young adults that are starting to be leaders, and we're going to be talking about the leaders of the trainers of these leaders. And these two areas go along well because adolescent scouting helps to fulfill the mission of the youth program. And as well, without the youth program, we wouldn't have adolescent scout. And then we have the third area that we call institutional development, that are the ones that give service to the NSOs, to these two areas, and provide them with everything that they need to know and to understand in order for an NSO to work. Not everyone can be just a scout troop or can be a scout troop leader either. We need chairpersons. We need someone to get in charge of the trash. Everyone that goes along that can be from institutional development. Then we have the second element, is the inclusion of people with disabilities. Is that we need to address these people with disabilities. We need to address and to adapt anyhow the youth program in order to address their needs. Scouting can play an active role, making these people be participants of an active role into our societies. Then we have the third element that we call inclusion of people in special situations of vulnerability and belonging minority groups. It's also, we're talking about adapting all those things, and we're talking even the paper of the families within the process, and the paper and the performance of the society to understand which are minority groups and vulnerable groups within an NSO, and how we're going to be able to address them. So this is basically the policy. It's 16 elements, right? 16 pages that I've just explained you with this little chart. I further encourage you to read them about this diversity and inclusion policy. So since we're going further and we're going from the policy to the implementation model, we're going to ask ourselves, how and what happens and how can we approve a diversity and inclusion policy in your NSO? What would you need? Well, first of all, you need to convince the political will. You need to convince the people that are in leadership in order for them to address it. As well, we need them to go to the highest instant possible in order to approve it, because that way we're only going to maintain throughout time. Then we have the second thing, is the establishment of contacts and agreement with external actors and experts on the subject. If we want to be talking about diversity and inclusion, we got to contact persons that know people, contact people that know about it. It might be people from your own country, experts from the UN, or even experts. You can contact the World Scout Bureau Inter-America Support Center here if you need further explanation and further expertise for you to know everything. Then number 3 is to have a constant review of the global and regional materials. Here in the Inter-America region, we have the diversity and inclusion policy, and we have 2 other materials. One we're going to be talking about here, but one was different definitions. As well, in the world level, we had the definitions of diversity and inclusion, and some statements that we as a WASM level had. Well, you might want to know that we're the first region that ever had their regional policy in diversity and inclusion. We're the second region that already has their diversity and inclusion policy. The first region was the European region, and they had further developments on this topic, but we're not far behind. Then we have the 5th thing that we need to take into consideration is the implementation of tools that allow us to know the existing social groups in our society. That means that we need to know what is happening within our groups. We need to know if our scout groups are diverse or not. And we need to know what are the vulnerable groups and diversity and different needs that our local communities have. For instance, it's common here in Latin America that many of people that are suffering from Venezuela have moved from their own country to their neighborhood countries, such as Colombians and Ecuadorians and Peruvians, and here in Panama. So we need to understand that we're having a vulnerable minority that are refugees from Venezuela, and how Scouting is adapting towards that. Here in Panama, for instance, there's groups of Venezuelan people because they are all living together and they're all trying to adapt to this new environment. And the last point that you have to take under consideration if you want your NSO to approve your policy within the region diversity and inclusion is to make the adjustment to the youth program to allow the participation of everyone. That means that we really need to take into account the different needs that our local groups are thinking. And as you can see, this is a policy that is transversal to the through the other three main areas of an NSO. That means that diversity and inclusion should also happen in every group and should also happen at national level. It should be taken into account and should be considered in every of the bodies of the NSO. Okay, so once we have approved here, right? So you can, and approving your policy can be as simple as writing your own name and just accepting it for your National Assembly, or it can be as difficult as doing it your own, with your own research, having the experts to write about it, compare it to the world level stuff. But we're not going to be talking about that because if you can see the last session, we talked about it and we went further in that topic. But once your own national policy is adopted, what is the next step? Well, we have here the next step. The next step is to consider the NSO and start doing the changes necessary for it to reflect diversity and inclusion. So for that, we have a reference guide. This reference guide is divided into 4 different topics. The first one is to understand the vision of the institutional vision, and to understand how scouting, diversity in scouting is working, and how are we going to approach it, and how are we going to be open about it as an NSO. Then the second thing that it talks is about disability people, and how can we include them in our youth program in our different activities that we include. Then we're going to be talking about what are vulnerable concepts and how can we as an institution address them. Then finally, but not least, we're going to be talking about minority groups. How can we address those special needs of just that few people, right? So if you go further this guy, you're going to ask yourself first to address and to understand the institutional vision. And you're going to have different questions that are going to let you go through that questioning within your NSO. But the first thing that you need to understand, and the first thing that you need to address as well, it's as well that everything is going to be happening. And then we have to understand that it has to have an institutional positioning towards this topic. And we have to have a diagnosis of what is happening and how it is. And this guy is going to help you out do it. And then we're going to understand, after having the diagnosis process within the area of diversity and inclusion, how are we going to give you support from the regional level, and how are you going to change your patterns, and how are you going to go further doing institutional development over this topic. Now, the second part, as I told you so, is that we're going to be talking about how to address the different disabilities that we have encountered ourselves. There are 6 different types of disabilities that we can address to, and we're going to be able to understand whether they are cognitive, sensory, motor disability, multiple disabilities, speech disabilities, sensory disabilities. We should adapt ourselves, and we should adapt our youth program for more people to participate and have the benefits of being a scout. Then we're going to understand, and we're going to have a question about how can we recognize minority groups and how can we address them in the best way possible. For this, we have a different list of minority groups that are listed in the UN lists, and how we're going to be able to adapt ourselves, and how we're going to be able to recognize which one should we choose and which ones should we understand and approach in a more suitable way. Then we're going to be talking about a little bit more about other types of minority groups. And minority groups can come from different positions. It can have external factors. They can be social. They can be even skin color based minority groups. We even question ourselves if, like, women are minority groups, depending on the context that we're going to be referring to. So the guide, as I told you so, gives you a set of different questions that you can ask yourself. But you're going to need, especially you're going to need a group of people that are going to lead this process, because without them, this policy is not going to make them possible. So you also need to establish a group of people that are going to be following up this process. And at the end, what we're going to have is to have good practices and initiatives that include people that are going to show that we are an inclusive and diverse movement. And it doesn't matter where these practices come from, but they have to be reflected as a national level with all the membership that we include in, or maybe some initiatives that are going to be taken along not only at a group level, but rather we're going to include people, minority groups in our national council. All of that should be taken into account. As well, if you have any mid-instance body, like the regions or provinces or something that you ever call that there. But also, good practice also happen within scout groups. I don't know about you, but we have plenty of examples. I don't know if you read this, but we have plenty of examples of good practices from our regional NSOs, and all of them are in Mundus Novus. We released this newsletter in April, so you can find it on Google about diversity and inclusion, and you can get inspired. As well, you can go in scout.org. So this is basically what we have, and how can you address and understand the topic of diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, it's considered is a new area that we started talking about. So we're still developing many tools for you to understand them. But if you also have developed any type of tool, we want to know, because up to now we don't know. Well, and we see this as an opportunity to actually to make an impact in our communities. Because we're going to be allowing more people to participate in a more active way in this cultural piece that we produce. There are going to be more people developing skills. There are going to be more people creating a better world. And we're going to be adapting into a new world that is more diverse and changing environment that we're going up to. So I actually encourage you to read not only the diversity and inclusion policy, but also the diversity and inclusion reference guide. So you can actually address many needs. and you could start moving. So if you have any further questions, I'll be here. And we're about to end our session. That was all for today. I hope you really enjoy the session. So I'm back over here, and we talked about this important topic a little bit more. And we talked about also different terms in diversity and inclusion. But today I'm going to be addressing why are we talking about especially is that we understand that this is a new policy and we are going to have a new plan that has already been approved by the committee that now it's in the it's in process by you, by your NSO, that you have to give further comments about it. So we're about to approve. We're going to have the conference as well this year, the regional conference. And that means that we're going to have a new plan and we're going to be working towards this. And this is a new area that we're really pushing towards to be working within. So that is why we're addressing this priority. And we're actually encouraging more people to join and to see what else can we do as scouting, what else can we do as region, and how can we reach that goal that we have of 100 million scouting by 2023. So this is going to be a key element so we can understand this. So what else? What happens if my NSO doesn't want to talk or has a stigma over diversity and inclusion? First of all, we encourage you to read this material. We encourage you to ask us and to write the Inter-America Support Center about this. And well, we are going to help you out throughout this process. Because what we want you is to rethink your organization. Maybe you're not going to be able to do all the steps or all the terms that we are described in the guide, but definitely you can start making some initiatives. For instance, we have a really good MOU with Special Olympics, and they're willing to help. So if you want to go further than that, you can ask here the regional support center to give you support. But also, we're going to ask you and to join our partners in order for us to become more inclusive and more diverse within our membership. Well, if there are no further questions for me, it was really joy to having you here. I hope if you have any further questions or something, you can write me down. I'm going to be writing down my email. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for being part of 5PtoGrow.